This is the Everyday AI Show, the everyday podcast where we simplify AI and bring its power to your fingertips. Listen daily for practical advice to boost your career, business, and everyday life.
I think there's a gap between the reality of vibe coding yourself useful tools and dashboards and the practicality of the enterprise reality of sharing it with your team. I mean, yeah, you can vibe code yourself some autonomous dashboard thingy, but what good is it if it's using old data and requires human duct tape, or if your team can't actually take advantage of it in a secure way? That's problem number one. Problem number two, the file sharing nature of big business is still stuck in the pre-AI era. I mean, you have static files that are shared back and forth via email, or versions of a deck that are stacked up on a desktop that are final one, final two, final three, really final, right? That doesn't exactly scream AI native. So OpenAI's new Codex Sites feature sets off to solve both of those problems. But I get the issue. You've probably had like zero time to use the new Codex Sites. There's huge drops every day. You want to go use that new Claude Mythos Fable 5 model. You want to check out all the new Codex plugins. You're itching to use the new Copilot Scout. You don't have time to spend hours with Codex Sites. Don't worry, I did the hard work for you. And that's why we do this thing on Wednesdays called Putting AI to Work on Wednesdays. So we're going to see if Codex is really a Replit and Lovable killer, and if it'll change the way that we share files forever, or if it's just another drop in the AI features bucket that will be forgot about in a couple of weeks. Well, there's only one way to find out. Let's get to it and do this thing live. All right. Welcome. If you're new here, my name's Jordan Wilson, but let's talk about the big picture. Static work is now becoming live software. Whether you've seen this or not, the business world is shifting. It's getting easier and easier to make living, breathing versions of your company's most important work. And I think we're obviously getting far away from the days of just sharing old and different version files to sharing information and intelligence for your company that updates automatically. Codex Sites shows how non-technical teams can build and ship usable apps and work, kind of these different workflow, dashboards, all these different things just from a single prompt. And I think the real shift is not just coding faster, it's shifting your mindset to work differently. So on today's show, stick with me for the next 25 minutes, and you're going to learn why static documents, decks, and version file chaos may be finally nearing their end. You're going to know how any team member can build and ship a live app from a single prompt today. You're going to see whether OpenAI's Codex Sites is a real Replit and Lovable competitor or something entirely different. And you're going to know what the agent layer inside of Codex Sites means for how your team runs its tools. Let's get to it. Welcome to Everyday AI. My name is Jordan Wilson. This thing's for you. It's your daily live stream podcast and free daily newsletter helping business leaders like you and me keep up with the nonstop avalanche of all these new AI features, these new AI tools. I take the time to run them all. I tell you what's important, what's not. You use that information to become the smartest person in AI in your company, and you grow your business and career. Sound like a good trade-off? Sweet. All you got to do is make sure to go to our website at youreverydayai.com. Sign up for the free daily newsletter. That's your cheat code. And we're going to be highlighting not just the big portions of today's show that you need to know, but also all the other AI news you need. No filler, no BS, just the facts, Jack. So, Codex Sites. Are they going to be the next big wave, right? Is this going to be something as big as like Claude Code was at the end of 2025 and early 2026? I think the potential is definitely there, but you're going to have to decide with me. And yes, on Wednesdays, we do these more hands-on demos. Sometimes they go really well. Sometimes they blow up in my face. So we'll see how this one goes. But this might be one of those ones you might want to catch the video version of this. So make sure you go to youreverydayai.com. We have the video versions on there. We did a 2-part series of a Codex breakdown. So if I'm showing you something and you're like, wait, what is this Codex thing? I already spent a ton of time, probably 30 plus hours putting these two shows together. So make sure you go listen to episode 781. That was part 2 in our 2-part series of kind of advanced Codex for newbies. Also, put together one of those extremely valuable things that you're going to see other people selling this stuff for like $500. I'm giving it away for free. So we put together a Codex site stack. This is 50 real use cases for how you can do exactly what we're going to be showing you how to do on today's show. So all you have to do is go repost this episode on LinkedIn. So if you're watching live, that's easy, 2 clicks. If you're on the podcast, we always put the link to today's LinkedIn show in the show notes. So make sure you check out the show notes, go click that button, repost it, and I'm going to send it your way. All right, let's start live. What could go wrong? My gosh, this one actually might be a little bit crazy because it's going to be a little tough. All right, so what could go wrong? Sharing a live agentic system. Hopefully I don't dox myself. That won't be good. All right, let's see how it goes. So I am in Codex. Codex, if you don't know, it is a much more powerful version of ChatGPT that's made for the desktop. So it has access to read and write all the files that you give it access to. It can use the terminal. It can control your browser. It can control your whole computer. So it's like if ChatGPT was more of an actual human using ChatGPT. That's what Codex is. So I have a prompt here, but let me start here. Sites is not available for everyone. That part's a bummer. So it is only right now available for business customers. So I am on my ChatGPT business plan, and that's an important differentiator here because the limits are not as good as my max plan. So I don't even know. I did one test of this before. I just barely snuck it in with 97%, using 97% of my limit. So I am trying to do something somewhat complex on a plan that is not my daily driver, right? My daily driver plan is my $200 a month plan, which I could do this all day, except the new Codex Sites feature is not available. So it's only available right now, at least on Teams plan. So the business plan, the enterprise plan, etc. So I have my prompt here. I'm going to click enter. All right. Hopefully this works. If not, I do have a finished version ready to show, but I'm hoping we can do this thing live and watch it work. So I'm going to explain my prompt as I go, but podcast audience, everyone else, I just went into Codex. I had the prompt ready on my screen, hit enter. Let me tell you just very quickly what we're going to do. I'm not going to read this prompt verbatim. All right. But so I am telling it to use sites. So I'm saying, build me a simple, elegant internal dashboard for everyday AI called Audience Momentum Dashboard. All right. And then I'm going to quickly explain some of the different things that I'm having it do and also why. And you can see here for our live stream audience, there's certain things in different colors. So I'm using 2 different skills. So a skill is essentially a repeatable workflow. And then I'm telling it a couple of times to use, just one time, to use a different app. Okay, so I'm having it control Chrome as well. So I'm having it use a set of prepackaged skills, and I'm also having it use Chrome. Aside from that, I'm also having it pull in data from 2 different MCP servers. So if you don't know what let me move this. There we go. I knew this was going to shoot up. All right, it's already starting to work. So you guys can watch it. Maybe we'll be able to watch it work live here a little bit. All right. So yeah, it's actually running live. It's using my browser right now. It actually started to take over my StreamYard tab. So I had to pull it into the other screen that I'm sharing. So I'm sharing my full screen. So things might be flashing on and off a lot. Anyways, what I'm having it do is something that I would have to do manually. And I wish I had the time to do this manually, but I don't because it takes a lot of time. So I'm having it create this audience momentum dashboard, which for me is something that takes a lot of clicks. It takes going into a lot of screens. But I do have it connected to my MCP servers for my email newsletter and the MCP server for my Circle community. That's our platform that we have, the Everyday AI Inner Circle community. There's like 3,000 members who go on there, network with other people, talk about all kinds of AI stuff. It's awesome. It's free. You should check it out. Anyways, to get the type of data that I need from both Beehive, which is my email newsletter provider, to get it from Buzzsprout, which is my podcast distribution platform, and to get it from Circle, to get just the minimum level, right? It's going to take me hundreds of clicks and usually a couple of hours. All right. Because sometimes you have to really dig down and go really deep. All right. So that's essentially what Codex is doing now. All right. So it's using a couple of my different tabs here. So you'll see it actually is using this tab in my browser right now, going through some of my podcast stats, right? So I'm not moving this. So the computer use inside Codex is goated. If you've ever used the Claude one, it makes the Claude one look like a preschooler, and this one has like 30 PhDs. So it has its own cursor. It operates at both the operating system and the user interface level. So it's really cool. So essentially, what I'm going to have going here is it's going to be pulling all of these stats that take me so long to compile. Because here's the reality and what I want you to think of your own problem when you're doing this. Software is both great and it's terrible. Right? Because a lot of times to get the most important things, some of this information might be available on your homepage of whatever dashboard you're thinking of. But sometimes you have to apply all these filters. You have to click around, right? You have to refresh a bunch of things. You have to stack different, things to get the exact metrics or the exact outcome you need. And some pieces of software that are a little more enterprise, you might be able to save some of these metrics. Some you can't. So in my case, right? To get the level of intel that I need, right? So if I'm like, okay, should I be focusing more on, teaching people about tool calling or teaching people about connectors, talking more about AI in education, right? I don't have time to go through dozens of web pages and all of these different metrics. So that's what I'm having Codex hopefully build me. Here's the other thing, and like what I want to call out right now. This is something that will be able to live. Right? When you pull in all of these things through Codex Sites, I can set up an automation that refreshes it every hour, every day, and I don't have to touch a thing. So I can just build this once inside of Codex Sites. Then I can run an automation that just gets it going every single day. It updates it every single day. And the great thing is I can then share this with my team. They don't need access to any of those other tools, right? This is when I had a marketing company, this is the main thing that I would do. This was like one of my main jobs is I would have to pull together different stats for different clients, other people on my team, and not everyone had access to all of these platforms, right? When you talk about role-based access control, maybe you don't want every single person in your organization to have access to, your email list with 100,000 customers, but maybe you want them to be able to tap into the insights that, that data has, but it might just take way too long. All right. So just real quick, a couple other things I'm asking it for. So I am using, the sites feature, and I'm going to show you guys a little bit more about that here in a second. I built my own skill called the Buzzsprout podcast stats. So I'm having it use one of my skills that I've built. I'm telling it to use Chrome with one of my certain Chrome profiles. And then I'm using a design taste front end skill. So I'm using one of my own skills, one of the OpenAI skills. I'm using computer use. I'm using Chrome. And then I'm also pulling from multiple MCP servers that I've already set up as well. Those don't show up as a different color. I'm just telling it to go in and use those things. And I'm having it do a lot of data analysis on the fly, right? I'm having it run essentially a 21-day podcast stats sprint. So it's looking at 21 different days of data. It's creating averages, so, hey, here's your average working Wednesday show. So I know if I put one out, if this one is going to be above the pace, below the pace, so I can look, is there good evergreen shows from months ago that are still performing above that first 21-day average? So not only am I just asking for, data from these different platforms, I'm asking it to do a lot of data analysis work as well. So I don't have to go and compare these things to averages, to totals and all of that. I just have a super smart model, GPT-5.5, do this for me. All right. So I'm running through here. I'm checking on the status. It's still going. It's still building. All good. So let me just quickly read a little bit about OpenAI. This is from their website saying, here's what Codex Sites is in their own words. They're saying, starting in preview for business and enterprise customers, Codex can now create and share interactive hosted websites and apps. Sites are a new kind of canvas for your ideas. Codex can take your ideas, analysis, and plans and turn them into dashboards, planners, review workspaces, project boards, galleries, and lightweight tools. Today, sites can be shared with anyone in your workspace via a URL, giving teams a shared place to explore work, contribute input, track track progress, and make decisions together. Ask Codex to create a site for an upcoming customer review, and it'll generate an interactive web page with relevant product updates, open questions, usage trends, and next steps for that account. Ask it to build a scenario planner from a financial model so leaders can compare assumptions instead of reading through tabs in a doc. Ask it to turn launch materials into a living hub where teams can find the latest messaging, milestones, owners, and decisions. Oh, as it's already done. It's starting to, test things in a new browser. Ask it to turn launch materials into a living hub where teams can find the latest messaging, milestones, owners, and decisions. Then ask Codex to keep the site up to date as details change. Instead of adapting to the limits of a single tool or file, teams can create sites that fit that work. And sites aren't static. They can also help track progress for a major project, help guide customer service reps, or act as a repository for your team's creative briefs. All right. And then they give some examples. So again, this is kind of the equivalent of creating bespoke software for your team that's connected to dynamic data that you can send anywhere. But it's not just creating software. Think of the things like spreadsheets, decks, all those things that you always have piling up in your downloads or your documents or your desktop folder. Version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4, version 5, right? The downside with the old way of file sharing is exactly that. The versioning is a headache, right? I remember editing video way back in the day. I would have like V2 final, V2 final, really final, V2 final, really final 3, right? And on and on and on. And if you're collaborating with a lot of people with static files, I think this is now looking at something like Codex Sites. It is now seeming like one of the biggest no-brainers out there, right? So it's not just, vibe coding, pieces of software or dashboards or creating tools, calculators, whatever it is, right, that your company can use, ROI calculators, calculating the likelihood of a sales, your own little Kanban tracking for, an event, right? Kind of like disposable software, but you can actually use it with your team with live data. It's not just those things, but even things like presentations, something that you would normally send, a Word document with a couple of charts in there. Okay, you can just create a site because it's much easier to update that site because it's always live. It's always dynamic, right? I can't count the number of times, it's in the hundreds, right? Where I've had to collaborate with internal or external stakeholders about like, oh, here's the new version. Here's the new version. Make sure you check V3.5, right? Like whatever it is, so much time back and forth is lost in this. And I think Codex Sites is a great way to counteract that. All right. So we're going to check back in. All right. Hopefully it finishes with my team rate limits, but let's just go over some other highlights here. I've already talked about the big problem with static documents is as soon as you hit send, you don't know if someone's going to read it within an hour, within a day, within a week. Chances are, especially with how fast AI moves, that changes the pace that your business moves as well. So with that, static files now, their life in many cases is like nothing. Right. As soon as you have to send that deck, that PDF, right, you force everyone through one linear experience, regardless of their role. And it's just a frozen snapshot in time. So Codex Sites can turn any prompt into a live tool that your team can actually use. So whether that's a client portal, an internal business tool, a dashboard, right, Codex can just build the app with the new Sites tool. So here's the other thing. It can host it. It can do auth. You can upload your database, right? You don't have to necessarily, even though Codex has great plugins with things like, and connections to things like GitHub, Vercel, Netlify, all these other things, you don't always need those, right? You don't need a developer to get you started. Because now operators can build and ship dashboards without waiting for an engineering queue. If you're a non-technical leader, you can receive live current business context, right? Updated in real time. I mean, you can literally have this thing updated automatically by Codex every single hour. Think if you have a spreadsheet that's receiving a lot of automatic data, right? If it's syncing from all these different sources, which is, what a lot of, BI teams do, a lot of marketing, advertising, you have things connected to Google Sheets, right? Why not take those 5 different sheets that have all these live flowing data pieces through them, right? And you're sometimes sharing this, downloading it and sharing it to external stakeholders that can't have access, to certain things, right? To be able to turn that into a site now is huge. You do right now have to have the same business plan account or enterprise plan account because you check these things by being connected to your OpenAI ChatGPT account. So I do hope in the future, there's not a way right now that you can share these with, external or put them on your website. But I do hope and assume that eventually OpenAI and the Codex team will move that direction eventually. So is this a Replit Lovable killer? Maybe. It depends on what you're using Replit or Lovable for, right? So Replit, Lovable, and Bolt, right? These are just full stack app builders with editors, databases, and hosting built in. So Codex Sites is definitely slimmer, but it builds directly inside of the workspace and context that your organization already use. That's the big thing. People don't understand, and Codex actually made this, the OpenAI team actually made this better with an update 2 weeks ago. So not only is Codex obviously can it always be connected to your dynamic data sources, but it now knows everything that happens in all of your chats, in all of your projects, right? Codex can literally start its own, it can, in one chat, it can go start its own chats. So it can control and understand everything that happens in your Codex account like a human could, right? So yes, you do have these more vibe coding or agentic engineering platforms like Replit, Lovable, and Bolt that are definitely more feature rich. They are much more mature and advanced. But if you're using something like Replit, Lovable, or Bolt, and you feel like you're only using like 10% or 20% of those services, and you're just like, I'm just using some of the basic features of this, it's more for the, hey, system, go build something for me that I can make live, right? And I don't necessarily understand the deployment side, the database side, all those things, right? If you're just using surface level, I think Codex Sites could be better, especially and replace your usage in those instances, especially if your team is heavy on ChatGPT or Codex. But the advantage is not just more features because Codex Sites does not have more features. It has fewer features now, but it's really with working with your existing Codex data without switching tools. That's the biggest thing. So not only that, but there are huge advantages to the actual features inside of Codex and then pairing those things with Codex Sites. So as an example, OpenAI just rolled out the 6 role-based plugins. You can obviously combine that with Codex Sites. It rolled out a great new annotation feature, right? Where if you see something in Codex Sites, you can use the annotation feature, highlight something, leave a little message for Codex, and it will go fix it, right? Whereas a lot of these other platforms don't have that. And sometimes making a couple small, whether they're structural changes, visual changes, UI, UX tweaks, a lot of times because it's the nature of generative AI, it may change a little bit of everything, right? So this is just a way to bring in the different features of Codex in things like automations. That's the other big one. Being able to connect your data and update something like this live. So this is early, right? Codex Sites is still very early. It's very young, but I think some of the best use cases are for marketing, agency teams, advertising, business, any BI teams, business intelligence. If you're in data analytics, if you're in any data role, and if you have a Teams ChatGPT account, this is huge to be able to just build a live tracker that your team can use today. One other thing, a couple pieces of advice. These are live by default. So keep that in mind. You can tell, there's some safeguards you can build in by like telling Codex, create a draft version of this before it's live. That's the other downside, right? So if you are more of a tinkerer or super non-technical and you're just getting started with Codex Sites, I wouldn't make this the most important thing for your organization and share it with everyone. And then you're going in and tinkering with this in the middle of the day, unless you set up like a draft version. I do assume that OpenAI is going to come up with, a little safeguard for this, but keep that in mind. And then, like I said earlier, right now, it gives you essentially an internal URL. And when you click on that URL, you have to log in with your ChatGPT account. So it's shared across those users within your ChatGPT organization to have that added level of security and data governance. So demos over memos. All right. I talked about this with Google's chief evangelist, Richard Seroter, a couple of months ago, and he said this thing that stuck with me. He said demos over memos. And I think that this is really indicative of where knowledge work is heading, especially for non-technical people. I don't want to read a PowerPoint. I don't, right? I don't want to read a long Word document with mountains of text. I want something interactive. I want something that's visual. I want something that's dynamic. I want something that's up to date. And I assume the rest of the business world will probably agree with me. You don't want to be looking at 4 different versions of something that you downloaded and then having to go back and forth on Slack or Teams or email or setting up a Zoom and being like, which version am I looking at? Again, maybe this Codex Sites will set off a whole new category of work, a deliverable that makes sense, an artifact that is living and breathing and reflects the current state, the grounded truth of your company. I think, right, whether it's something like Codex Sites or anything else, I do assume that this is the future deliverable that's going to be picking up the most steam. I assume things like decks, spreadsheets, even old school BI dashboards are going to eventually start to lose their momentum because of the lack of flexibility, because of the static nature, or because, well, it takes too long because there's only 2 people in an entire 10,000 person organization who can make those things happen. So now you bring all of these features and functionality to non-technical business leaders. I think the opportunity is huge. It is here to execute faster. And I think Codex Sites point toward fewer email attachments and fewer competing versions of the same file, which is more clarity, more speed, and more velocity for your average knowledge worker. All right, let me check back in on our Codex site. Let's see. Did it work? All right, it did. Fantastic. So AI moves too fast to follow, but you're expected to keep up. Otherwise, your career or company might lag behind while AI native competitors leap ahead. But you don't have 10 hours a day to understand it all. That's what I do for you. But after 700 plus episodes of Everyday AI, the most common questions I get is, where do I start? That's why we created the Start Here series, an ongoing podcast series of more than a dozen episodes you can listen to in order. It covers the AI basics for beginners and sharpens the skills of AI champions pushing their companies forward. In the ongoing series, we explain complex trends in simple language that you can turn into action. There's 3 ways to jump in. Number 1, go scroll back to the first one in episode 691. Number 2, tap the link in your show notes at any time for the Start Here series, or you can just go to starthereseries.com, which also gives you free access to our Inner Circle community where you can connect with other business leaders doing the same. The Start Here series will slow down the pace of AI so you can get ahead. All right, live stream audience, I'm bringing this back up. So I can go through here. It only took 11 minutes, which actually isn't that bad. So I can go through, see exactly what it did. On the output, right? Even in my prompt, I had it spin up a sub agent to check the work. That's probably why it, ended up eating some of my, let's see. Okay, not bad. This one did much better. It only took up about half of my usage. So I'm going through here. I'm checking. Okay, it went through, looked at my Buzzsprout, looked at my Circle, looked at my Beehive. Perfect. All right, so I'm scrolling through, and then it started to test the visuals. It went through, it was testing it for mobile and desktop responsiveness, which is really cool. It spawned the sub agent. The sub agent went in there, fixed a couple of things, poked and prodded, and then it created the site. Awesome. So let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so I'm going to have to log in. Let me see if I can view the local host version of this. And I want to have to log in here live. Let's see if there's another way I can do this. All right, I'm going to have to stop sharing my screen for just a second as I put in my password. You love these demos. Love these demos. All right, let me finish logging in. Yeah, I have to juggle a couple different accounts here. All right, let me pull this on the screen, and there we go. So our live stream audience can see, but podcast audience, I have a dashboard here. I have a dashboard, pretty nice. I have a URL that I can share within my ChatGPT business account. Pretty great. Scrolling through, it's nice and smooth. It has this kind of parallax feature, which is really nice. So it pulled in, right? So it said podcast demand is broad, Beehive engagement is healthy, and circle segments point to a training and ROI need. So it has kind of like these little live indicators. So it has the total number of downloads over a 21-day period, the number of our Beehive subscribers, our click-through rate, open rate, the number of active community members in our circle, the number of recent posts and comments in our community, all those things. Here we go. So now it's showing me some podcast trends. So it's showing me, okay, cool. So, it's showing me like yesterday's episode, or no, Monday's episode, showing it's above average. So it's saying that one is off to a hot start, maybe because we covered, Apple's WWDC. So it's kind of showing me a couple episodes that are outpacing where they would normally pace. And I know that now because it went into the last 21 days and it looked daily downloads. So it knows, hey, normally a podcast episode that's 2 days old, let's say it has 5,000 downloads. This one has 7,200. So it's outpacing, right? Even though it's only a day old, it's outpacing where it would normally be. These are things that I normally don't know because I don't have time to go in there and create these little, formulas or little algorithms that tell me these things. So it's going through there. It's finding, podcast episodes that are out to a good start. It's showing me some of the most popular episodes over the last 21 days and some of the reasoning, right? So, hey, it said this one did well because of a strong mix of model news and practical tools. And then it's showing me also, which is pretty cool, it went through, even though I didn't ask it to, it went through and found me some evergreen and back catalog movers. So it looks like, this episode from 5 months ago, over the most recent 21-day period, still had like 700 downloads. And I have no clue why, right? But essentially it's saying that it's part of the Start Here back catalog is still drawing a lot of demand. Cool. So I know that episode that's now really old is still getting a lot of downloads. So I might, as an example, be able to look at this and say, hey, maybe I should create a fresher version or a new and updated version of that episode from 6 months ago or 5 months ago that's still driving a ton of demand, because that means people are searching for it. Or, I'd probably have, I would go in and update that little prompt that I did and always have it investigate these things and give me a, 3-step action plan or something like that. So I wouldn't use this as is, right? This is just for a demo purpose. And I was trying to get it in my usage limits to be able to show it live. But once I'm able to use my full, token allotment, I would really build this out a lot more to not just find these things, but then build out actionable next steps. But right now, this is something that's going to save me hours a week, right? Same thing here. It's looking at my newsletter focus. It's breaking down some of my more recent newsletters. The number of sent, open, and click for all these recent ones, created some nice graphics for me, kind of our acquisition mix over the last 7 days, where our new newsletter subscribers are coming from, the engagement trend over the last couple of days. So some of these things I know are readily available in my Beehive dashboard. Some of them I'm looking at and I'm like, these require a couple clicks deep. Not only that, but it's bringing together. So it looks like, I'm trying to do a rough estimate here, at least 50 pieces of data that would probably force me to go into at least 30 different screens and hundreds of clicks, right? So that's the reality of something that you can start thinking of today. What is that business problem that you are either forced to do, but it takes way too much of your manual time, that you would like to be able to share that with your colleagues, or something that you don't have the time, or something that you or someone on your team does not have the current technical capabilities to be able to pull all of this together in a way that just visually makes sense. Because as you can see from the live stream audience that's looking at this dashboard, it's really slick, right? This is one shot, very simple, right? I didn't create some, overly complex prompt. I did a good job at building it out and telling it exactly what I needed, using a couple built-in skills to make sure that this worked. But this, with not a lot of effort, is something that our team could use to save hours every single week. And it also gives us something in terms of insights that we would not be able to do, because no one on my team right now can go in and, calculate these metrics, or this little algorithm it used to find, 21-day pacing to say, hey, these episodes are more evergreen than others. I can't get that in any of my current dashboards unless I download all of this information and put it into a large language model like Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever. All right. So that's a wrap on today's show. So big picture, I think Codex Sites is really getting rid of two big problems. Number one, the file versioning and sharing these, 10 different versions of a document that are floating around everywhere. No one knows what version. The old version gets updated. Oh my gosh, we just wasted hours. Hopefully we're moving to the demos over memos era of being an AI native workforce. And I think that's the big one, is having a new type of live artifact that is actually AI native, that's connected to your data, right? So that's problem number one. And then problem number two, it's just kind of bridging the gap between this vibe coding capability, right? Anyone can go in and create kind of helpful but disposable software by uploading static documents. So being able to connect this to your team's dynamic data in a way that's already approved by, your C-suite or your IT or whoever, to have that level of data security and governance, and to be able to build something that's actually useful without having to wait months for someone from engineering to put it together, and to have that level of flexibility. This is huge, y'all. So as a reminder, go check out episode 781. That's the second part of a two-part series of Codex. So if I mention anything and you're like, okay, let me take this Codex thing a little bit more seriously, go check that out. And remember, go find today's episode. I put together a ridiculously helpful, right? You're not going to learn too much from my prompt, and I didn't even read it all because it was kind of long. I gave you guys the literal stack to do all of this. All right. 50 different real use cases, taking into account all of the Codex skills that are publicly available, taking into account all of the Codex apps that are currently available, looking at all of their capabilities and how they can actually grow your business. I gave you one use case that's really helpful for me, but I have a stack of 50 of them that is ready to go for you. All you have to do, go repost this show on LinkedIn. So if you are watching on the LinkedIn live stream, that's very easy. If you're listening on the podcast, check out the show notes. We always leave a link to the LinkedIn post. So that's a wrap. Speaking of links, make sure to go to youreverydayai.com. Hopefully you enjoyed putting AI to work on Wednesdays like we always do. Let me know if this is helpful. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you back tomorrow and every day for more Everyday AI. Thanks, y'all.
And that's a wrap for today's edition of Everyday AI. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a rating. It helps keep us going. For a little more AI magic, visit youreverydayai.com and sign up to our daily newsletter so you don't get left behind. Go break some barriers, and we'll see you next time.